China is threatening to start a war if Taiwan elects the wrong leader in their elections next year. The candidates China wants to win just don't seem to be playing ball. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. Taiwan is scheduled to hold its presidential elections on January 13th, and depending on the outcome of this election, Taiwan's fate could radically change. Why? Because China, of course. The biggest factor in this election, and really all of Taiwan's elections, is China. China has made it a top priority to unify with Taiwan, and it has threatened to use force to do that if necessary. I guess unify isn't the right term so much as assimilate, like the Borg. For the last 8 years, Taiwan has been led by the Democratic Progressive Party. The Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, is the party that has so far been the most clear-eyed on China. It knows what an existential threat China is to Taiwan, and it has not only vowed to defend Taiwan's independence, but also wants to wean itself from China economically. As you can imagine, China hates the DPP. It knows that the DPP isn't going to let Taiwan go down without a fight, which is why it's framing this election as a critical choice between peace and war. Yes, China is basically threatening to start a war if Taiwan chooses the wrong candidate. Which candidate is the right candidate, according to China? Well, let's take a look at the candidates. Ing-wen has to step down next year because of constitutional term limits. By the way, if you ever need proof Taiwan is its own country and not part of China, just remember their leader abides by term limits in a constitution. So, Tsi's second in command, William Lai, is running as their party's candidate. I'll come back to him a bit later, but for now, the important thing to know is that China does not want him to win. Now, the opponents of the DPP are to varying degrees China appeasers. They recognize China is a threat, but they think they can maintain the peace by working with China instead of becoming more independent of China. I mean, it totally worked for Hong Kong. Right now, the leading opposition candidate is Odysee of the Kuomintang or KMT party. He's the mayor of New Taipei, the biggest city by population in Taiwan, and was once Taiwan's top law enforcement officer. On the spectrum of China friend versus China enemy, the KMT is the furthest to the China-friendly side of the spectrum. Ho's campaign has argued that he'd be able to open lines of communication with Beijing, something current President Tsai Ing-wen hasn't been able to do since she first took office in 2016. What will those communications look like? Do you want a red carpet when you waltz in and take over? To open those lines of communication, he said he's willing to agree to what's referred to as the 1992 Consensus, which recognizes only one China. From China's perspective, that means Taiwan is part of China. In a 2019 speech, Xi Jinping described the 1992 Consensus as meaning one country, two systems, the same model Hong Kong had before the Chinese Communist Party basically took it over in 2020. To be fair, there are other countries that have one country with multiple systems. As an American, it's wild to think that Texas is not only in the same country as California, but even in the same hemisphere. Odysee has made it clear that he sees Taiwan as independent and would fight to keep it that way. But he says he's willing to accept the 1992 Consensus in order to open dialogue. That's, shall we say, a pretty naive take on Taiwan-China relations. That's like a dog thinking that they're independent and that they're just choosing to wear a muzzle and sleep in a locked crate. Now, somewhere in the middle of the spectrum is the Taiwan People's Party, or TPP. Its founder and leader is wen-je. He's a former surgeon who in 2014 became the mayor of Taipei. Lots of mayors in this race. Early on in his political career, wen-je was a supporter of the Sunflower Movement, which sprang up to protest a trade agreement the KMT government negotiated with China. Back in 2014, wen-je was endorsed by the DPP for his stance on China issues. But over time, he gradually moved further to the side of the KMT, making him lose the support of what used to be his base. However, I would say his most controversial move wasn't related to politics at all. On our other channel, China Unscripted, we interviewed Ethan Gutman, the author of The Slaughter. He's one of the premier researchers on China's forced organ harvesting program, which uses prisoners of conscience as a live organ bank for its transplant industry. Gutman said that when he was doing research for his book, Dr. wen-je admitted that he negotiated with a Chinese hospital to get organs for his patients in Taiwan. I guess you can't just order organs online to be delivered to you. There should be an app for that. Postmortem mates. During those negotiations, the hospital made it clear those organs would be coming from practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual practice the CCP has been trying to destroy for over 2 decades.
All the organs will come from Falun Gong. And these people, they don't drink, they don't smoke, they practice very healthy Qigong. And so you don't have to worry about the quality of the organs. They're not coming from prisoners who've been drug addicts and so forth, or hepatitis. Dr. Ke admitted that to my face.
wen-je later tried to walk those comments back after he got into politics, and even tried 3 times to have Gutman prosecuted for defamation. A court rejected the defamation charges each time, most recently this September. Probably because it's not defamation if you just repeat what someone says. What's he going to sue next, an echo? wen-je has tried to portray the Taiwan People's Party as more moderate than the KMT on China. But at the same time, he's clearly compromised when it comes to China. So that looks like a difference without a distinction. So we've got the DPP candidate William Lai, the KMT candidate Hou Yu-yi, and the TPP candidate wen-je. But there's one more candidate to know about, because he shows just how dirty China will get its hands when it comes to Taiwanese elections. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. Taiwan's upcoming elections have China all in a tizzy. China has framed the race as a choice between peace and war, with war represented by the Democratic Progressive Party's candidate, William Lai, and peace represented by either the Kuomintang candidate, Hou Yu-yi, or the Taiwan People's Party candidate, wen-je. But there's one more candidate worth mentioning. The last candidate in this race was billionaire Terry Gou, the founder of Foxconn, which makes a lot of Apple's iPhones in China. He was running as an independent candidate, but dropped out right before the deadline to register late last month. Gou said he got into the race to unite what I call the pro-China faction, which if you think about it, doesn't make any sense because he was running against the pro-China candidates as an independent. Then again, pro-China politicians in Taiwan don't make sense, so this is on par. If he had stuck around, he would have split the pro-China vote even further, making it more likely the DPP would win. China must have seen that too and thought, we gotta get rid of this guy or our candidates are finished. Say, didn't he found a business in China that he still cares about? Now, Gou had already stepped down from his roles as the CEO and board member of Foxconn before he ran, but he's still heavily invested in the company. China started a tax and land use investigation into Foxconn in October that sources inside Foxconn said were politically motivated. Immediately after the investigation was announced, Gou basically disappeared from the public eye. To be fair, this is the least violent way China made someone disappear, so progress? China made no secret of the fact that Gou running in Taiwan's election would be a win for the DPP, and him dropping out looks like a pretty direct result of China's pressure on Foxconn. And hey, maybe that was a win for everyone. A win for China and Gou, who wanted to unite the pro-China vote, a win for the DPP because it exposed Gou's weakness on China, and a win for the country because he's not going to be president anymore. But Gou didn't completely disappear. Leading up to the November 24th deadline to register their party's candidates, Gou encouraged the pro-China candidates to run together, and they seriously considered it. However, that broke down in a spectacular dumpster fire when they failed to agree on who would lead this new faction. Yeah, unifying China will go great when they can't even unify among themselves. They agreed to base leadership on who was doing the best in 6 polls. And I'm sure they thought it was going to be a straightforward process because they invited the media to watch. But when they failed to agree on the margin of error, it turned into the political version of a bar brawl. It descended into 90 minutes of on-stage insult trading, political grandstanding, and at times off-topic ranting, beamed to the island of some 23 million people. In one of the most dramatic moments, Hou Yu-yi read a private text message from candidate wen-je in which Gou said Gou needed to find a reason to drop out of the presidential race. Ultimately, the KMT faction got so fed up that it ended up walking out of the room. Not a good look. One analyst for Bloomberg said it was so bad, this could make people question their ability to lead the country.
Yeah, no one expected quite the public debacle that we saw yesterday. I think it's really going to go down in history as one of just the strangest moments in Taiwanese politics we've seen in quite some time.
And that's saying something, considering actual bar brawls are not that uncommon in Taiwan's parliament. A barroom brawl in parliament? I'd expect that in Australia, but Taiwan? What all this means is that the DPP has a serious chance of winning this election. Does that mean war is imminent? I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. For a while, the DPP's opposition parties were considering running on a single ticket, but that broke down in a spectacular fashion. So as you can imagine, the DPP is feeling a lot more relaxed now, unless the citizens of Taiwan vote based on who they think would do the best in a roast battle. As I mentioned before, Terry Go dropped out, and now the TPP and KMT have gone their separate ways and registered their candidates independently, which will dilute the pro-China vote. And what has boosted William Lai's chances even more, according to analysts, is his pick for a running mate. He chose Taiwan's de facto ambassador to Washington, bi-khim, who's reportedly close with leaders on both sides of the aisle in Washington. That's an important asset to have in the administration because the U.S. is Taiwan's most important ally. It's also impressive being close with American Democrats and Republicans because they're from Texas and California, which seems like they're in two different hemispheres. Not only is Xiao's mother American, but she went to 2 colleges in the U.S. before getting elected to Taiwan's legislature. Analysts say her foreign policy experience will also be a good complement to Lai's mostly domestic political experience. But probably her most important asset is her closeness to President Tsai Ing-wen. Even though William Lai has been Tsai's right-hand man since 2020, he's perceived in Washington and Beijing as not seeing eye to eye with her on Taiwan independence. Back in 2017, William Lai described himself as a pragmatic worker for Taiwan independence, a label which led to worries he might declare Taiwan's independence if elected. Tsai's government has taken the stance that Taiwan is already independent from China and therefore doesn't need to declare independence, because it would just be redundant. That would be like Wendy's declaring their Baconator isn't popular among kosher vegans. Yeah, we assumed. William Lai has tried hard to ditch his pro-independence image, but it's been hard to shake. Him being the DPP party candidate has sparked concern in Washington. That's because the U.S. has vowed to defend Taiwan if China invades. The U.S. is worried that if Taiwan were to declare its independence from China, that could spark a war. And the U.S. doesn't want to deal with any more wars right now. Michael Cunningham of the Heritage Foundation told Nikkei Asia that by nominating Xiao as his running mate, Lai is also sending a message that he's serious about his pledge to follow Tsai's moderate path if he's elected, rather than getting rid of all of Tsai's advisors and moving in a more radical direction. Of course, China's propaganda has gone into overdrive trying to convince the public he's a separatist. And it's also ratcheting up the pressure on Taiwan, hoping to make people think that if they vote for the DPP, they're voting for war. In the lead up to the election, China has been sending a record number of fighter jets and warships near Taiwan. Back in October, it also extended a probe that hurt trade relations with Taiwan, which Taiwan's government said was an attempt to interfere in the election. China is Taiwan's largest trading partner, and so by stopping trade, it gives Taiwan a taste of the economic damage that could happen if the DPP were re-elected. China has also banned tourism to Taiwan since the pandemic, which according to market research company Capital Economics, could boost Taiwan's GDP by over 1% if it were lifted. And then there are the more covert ways China's trying to interfere. One way that China controls leaders in foreign countries is through honey traps. How they usually do this is by inviting politicians to China, showing them a good time, then drugging them and filming them with a prostitute. Basically everything Charlie Sheen does voluntarily, only they're not winning. That footage can then be used as blackmail to co-opt the politician. One prominent DPP lawmaker ended his re-election bid in October after intimate photos from his affair with a Chinese woman were sent to Taiwanese media. Is that a coincidence? Knowing China, probably not. Like I said, honey traps are a common tactic China uses to co-opt politicians. That's not all, though. In August, counterfeit documents circulated that claimed Lai had pledged $320 million for a housing project during an official visit to Paraguay. Taiwan's government refuted those claims and gave evidence the documents were fake. But who knows? There could be people who don't believe them and think that this shows DPP corruption, because if they see it on the internet, then it must be true. Remember, kids, the internet is like pro wrestling, full of carnies trying to make you believe it's real. Now, as I said before, China hopes its pressure campaign will make voters think twice about voting for the DPP. But here's the thing. It could also do the opposite. If Taiwanese voters think the DPP will stand up for Taiwan's independence, whereas the pro-China faction will try to bring Taiwan closer to China just to keep the peace, they may be more likely to vote for the DPP. Taiwan saw what happened to Hong Kong once the UK handed it back to China. The whole thing about China respecting the one country, two systems model was a sham almost from the get-go. China honored their word about as much as Harvey Weinstein honored consent. No matter what political party is in power, China's going to try to take over Taiwan. And most reasonable people know that negotiating with China isn't going to work. Sure, China will engage in dialogue if it gets the right concessions, but it's not going to give up one of its core interests just because someone asks nicely. Xi Jinping has staked his legitimacy on taking over Taiwan. And even more importantly, it's in the Chinese Communist Party's constitution to have Taiwan unify with China. It's literally the only part of the Constitution they do honor. So Taiwan's upcoming election is going to be a wild ride. Now, I got a video I'd like to show you, but first, China Uncensored would not exist without support from viewers like you. Join the fans I call the China Uncensored 50-cent army by joining our exclusive social media platform on Locals for a small monthly contribution. That's china-uncensored.locals.com. As a thank you, I'll respond to their questions and comments. Today's comes from Tea Drinker. After finishing 2 tasty boba teas, brown sugar and taro, I just want to express my thanks and gratitude for Taiwan bringing boba tea into this world. Truly a gift from Taiwan. Not as nice as the gift of boba tea pizza, though. But Taiwan actually gives the world a lot. Taiwan manufactures most of the world's advanced semiconductors or computer chips. The modern technological world literally depends on Taiwan. And a free Taiwan, along with the rest of the First Island chain, essentially prevents the Chinese Communist Party from projecting military power out into the Pacific and towards America. So outside of the fact that Taiwan is one of the largest democracies in Asia, and we have a moral obligation to protect them from communism, there's also a very practical reason for defending Taiwan. So drink up your bubble tea, tea drinker, and thanks for your support. And this is the video I was telling you about. In my ongoing attempt to talk about things YouTube considers too controversial while hiding it in gaming content, I have a new episode of Deep Thoughts While Gaming. It's about Animal Crossing, but it's really about unrestrained materialism. I don't always just criticize communism. Check it out and let me know what you think. And if you want to support China Uncensored, head over to china-uncensored.locals.com. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.